High Point University presents A Conversation with Cam Marston and Nito Cobain is a presentation of UNC TV in association with High Point University.
Hello, I'm Nito Cobain, president of High Point University, and today I welcome you to yet one other program where we invite some thought leaders, people who really know their stuff about subjects that matter to each of us and to all of us. And today my guest is Cam Marston, one of the world's leading experts on generational insights. Different age groups, how do they fit in the workforce, and how can we work with them and through them to achieve wonderful things in life. Cam, welcome to High Point University.
Thank you very much, Nito.
You know, one of the questions that I think is on people's minds all the time is that employers today are challenged with the changing world. The world is flat. There's so many demands in the marketplace. Competition is more severe than it's ever been before. And I could just hear employers saying to you, where do we find good people to come and work with us to help us achieve our goals?
That is the primary challenge that I am asked to address with my clients, which is where do we find good people? How do we take the people we have and make them better? What trends are going to change our workforce coming in the future? What I work with them on and help them understand are the forces that have shaped each of the generations today and how they approach work, how they approach problem solving in groups, how they choose where to work. And I do my best to connect the points for these employers, connect the dots, so that they can create programs internally that solve the problems that makes their workforce much more effective.
Mm-hmm. Is there a generation better than another in terms of efficiency, effectiveness, commitment, grit?
There is a belief right now that the generations that have laid down the track thus far, and in our society, known as the baby boomers and the generation that preceded the baby boomers, the matures, also called the GI, the silent generation, that their methodologies, that their work ethics, that their motivations for working are what we should aspire to. And it's mainly because those generations are still leading those workplaces, and they are looking for people who remind them of themselves when they were entering the workplace. So my role is to educate these employers. You're going to have a really, really hard time finding someone that reminds you of yourself just simply because of the changing demographics of our society. Therefore, you must change to accommodate these demographics. It doesn't mean the work won't get done. It doesn't mean teams are less important or anything. But the concerns, the value systems perhaps of the younger workforce are going to be different from your own. You can't change them. You can change yourself. You can change what you expect and how you manage and lead and motivate. And that's what we work with them on.
And Cam, does this concept that the employer has to change, does that sell? I mean, I can see entrepreneurs saying to you, listen, I started this company from scratch. I gave it all I got. It's my baby. I've got thousands of employees. There's 7 billion people in the world. I have access to robotics. I'm thinking of an industrial manufacturer. If I start changing at every whim and at every turn, I might lose the very fiber and fabric of our culture, our direction, our vision, our values.
It's a perfectly sensible, predictable reaction to my request of them that they consider the change. And I completely understand where they're coming from. My response to them is, why have you called me then? I suspect that you've tried things that haven't worked. Why have you called me then? If you want to hear my insights, then it's going to involve you taking a hard look at the way you do things. It doesn't mean that the integrity of your processes or the integrity of your product, the results, the product you provide your customers, the service, whatever it may be, changes. It means the way you manage and lead people must change. Your customer-facing positions must remain the same. That's where your successes come from. But to get there today requires a new process. And you want to hold on to the roots of the system, let's say. I say to the entrepreneur, those roots of the system have created you. They're a part of who you are. I'm not asking you to dismiss them, nor to diminish their importance. I'm asking you to acknowledge that there has been a change in the way the next generation is going to come to work and what they look out what they want out of a job. And once you can acknowledge that, then the process becomes much easier.
What got you interested in this whole subject?
I started research, a very small research firm in Charlotte about 20 years ago now. And it was employers that were asking me to lead focus groups, exit surveys, to figure out why turnover had picked up in their workplace. So I would do these things, and I would come back to my employer with, if you would imagine, a 3-ring binder. Here's the information that I found, here's my summary. And after doing several of them, began to notice that there was a generational trend, and people that were leaving the company between these ages were citing different reasons than I'd ever seen before. These people were leaving for these reasons, but there's this new group, and their answers were not anything I'd seen. And at the time, I didn't know it, and I don't think it had a label at the time. It was called Generation X. So I assembled all these different research projects, which were now in a binders on my wall, into a product, which essentially was a seminar, a presentation to HR groups. And I would go to them and say, I've got trends on turnover in the workplace in the Charlotte region. I think you'd be interested. And those people came back to me and said, we are very interested in this. Would you bring that to our management meeting? So I said, sure, but don't you need me to do the focus group? Nope, we just want the content because that is happening here. That was 20 years ago. Today, those same requests happen. We need an update. We want to know what's going on. And now I have a team of people that gathers that information and organizes it for me and brings it to the employer. But it's no longer identifying simply the trends, but the solutions to the trends, the best practices that we've picked up along the way.
So give us an idea of, segment those generations for us, and give us maybe a couple of characteristics,
sure,
a couple of observations about each one.
Senior to junior. With the oldest one I call the matures. They're also called the silent and the GI generation, many references to this group. Born 1944 and prior. They were children during the Second World War. I'm sorry, they were either children during the Second World War or fought in the Second World War. Following the matures are the baby boom generation. Baby boomers are very popular. One name for the generation, not multiple names. 1946 to 1964. The baby boomers in the workplace tend to be very loyal, historically, traditionally described. One employer for a long time. That began to change. They have a strong work ethic defined in hours. They work long, they work hard. If I were to ask any baby boomer to describe their work ethic, they would give me a number of hours they work per week. My work ethic is measured in hours. Following the baby boomers is what we call Generation X, a smaller generation, 1965 to 1979. Smaller generation, both in birth years as well as population. It's a blip. It's a downturn on the population chart. They're individualists generally. They're nomads. They're some would say reclusive or loners. They're generally not the same degree of team player that the baby boomers are known for. They're loners oftentimes. Working from home, working remotely is a dream come true for many of them. Following the Generation Xers is the millennials, 1980 through 2000. They're also known as Gen Y. They're a very social group. They've been raised in circles and play groups, around tables going through elementary school. Being a part of the group is very important to them. Technology, they've never known a day without the technology. They've had a lot of, they've entered schooling as schooling changed. Parenting trends changed with the baby boomers, who are the parents of the millennials, becoming the helicopter parents. They're the ones in the workplace today where the majority of my clients are most concerned. I want to find an employee that reminds me of me in my early 20s, and that's a challenge. The millennials have simply come of age in a time where there's no reason for them to be that way. They've not been given, the environment has changed radically. They can't be expected to be that way. Following the millennials, the youngest generation is what I call the I-Gen. Roughly 16 years old, 17 years old and younger. They're all my kids. I got 4 members of this generation. And am trying to research and study them and hopefully bill it all to business research. It's not going very well with the IRS, but they are, technology being a big important part of them. Our early research on them says they will want to be even more individualistic and independent, and unique is a better word, than even the millennials have been. But it's really, really soon to make that call on them.
So, I hear a lot about the millennials, of course, that so many companies today are trying to hire millennials, they do indeed struggle with the questions that you bring up. What are the 2 or 3 pieces of advice that you would give a manager, a leader, a president of an organization who has a number of these millennials? I mean, what you would say to them, here is the best way to work with this group. Fill in the blank.
We all have preferences in the workplace. Our preferences come from very real places, very real experiences, and they can be very generational. I, as a generational, will have generational preferences around the workplace, which I think are the best way to do things, the right way to do things. And I will push these preferences on anybody that works with, for, or near me and say, this is the way you should behave, and this is what I want out of you. The best thing that I could do for any manager or employer is to tell them, number one, become very aware of what your preferences are and how they manifest themselves in your leadership style. Once you're aware of what they are, ask yourself, would anything be wrong if I got rid of my own preferences and allowed this next generation, the senior generation, whomever, preferences to run?
Give us an example of a preference.
As a Generation Xer, a generational preference of the Xer is to hold fewer meetings of all hands. Mm-hmm. They're not a good use of time. Mm-hmm. Nothing really gets done. Everybody has to try to say something to sound intelligent. Most people drag their feet to come to them. Let's eliminate them. That is my preference, to eliminate these meetings. My preference as a manager is to leave people alone to do their job. The less interference I give them, the better they're going to do. And if I execute my preferences in a workforce full of baby boomers, a very team-oriented generation, and millennials, a very group and social and team-oriented generation, I have alienated these 2 parts of my workplace by eliminating these types of meetings. So I would tell my Xer, get rid of that preference. Your boomers need this consensus-building opportunity on a regular basis. Your millennials need to gather as a group and talk about what they're doing and what they're learning. When you can get rid of your own preferences and allow theirs to flourish, you'll find that they'll like you. They'll like you more. And in times where you need them to go to the wall for you in situations, they'll do so, not because you're the boss, because they like you and they want you to succeed. Get rid of your own preference. As I say it, get out of your own way. Identify what your preferences are and then get out of your way and let those flourish so they can continue to do the job.
So Cam, how does a small business, somebody who's got 20 employees, 30 employees, who has no resources to, human resources, fiscal resources, to allocate to such development of training or shifting the paradigm of how we do business? I can understand how a company that has thousands upon thousands of people would have a program for these millennials, and we're gonna train all of our managers how to deal with it, how to hire, how to train, how to educate, how to culture, etc. But small businesses, which is the backbone of America, has got to be really challenged by a new generation of employees that may in fact demand different ways of managing and leading.
They are, and they are, frankly, where my heart is. These are the people that struggle the most, and I agree. They're the backbone. We know this, and when I can find opportunities to help them, I do everything I can. The information that they need is available out there through books I've written, videos we've done, etc. But their opportunity comes through their association meetings to get information. That's where a great conduit of my content to them is. But what you're going to find in these smaller communities or these smaller businesses is a family feel, a feel of compassion and caring. The smaller the business, typically, the more people are connected within that business versus a big Fortune 500 where you could never meet everybody. The smaller companies are dependent on everybody and they know everybody's name and children's name, etc. That feeling of family, of connection, of being in it together in a small business is in fact something that creates a very strong, powerful recruiting and retention tool for the very millennials that we're talking about. So they do have a challenge, these small businesses, in understanding what it is. But when they could create a connection within the small business of everybody matters and is valued here, it's a magnet for the next generation. They're harder. The millennials have a harder time finding these small businesses. They're simply, These small businesses aren't out there banging the drum for new employees like the bigger ones are. But when they find them and step in, there's a comfort in there, and it's a great retention tool for them.
So what are the three most common, most prevalent preferences that millennials have? You mentioned one, which is being in groups and teams.
Group environment, teams, working together is one. There is a demand constantly for the newest and most sophisticated technology in their industry to do their job. It's a very expensive request for a small business.
And that's because they came up from literally 3 years old with iPhones and iPads and...
Consumer-oriented electronics have a great intuitive feel to them that oftentimes business-oriented electronics don't. So the belief is the newest technology will have a more sophisticated and easy feel to it than this legacy stuff. So there's the constant demand for the newest stuff, which will be easier to use and more functional. So there's the group thing, there's the demand for the newest technology, and a flexible schedule, flexible workplace.
Yeah, so talk to me about this third one. At the campus of Hype University, we have a lot of business people come here. We have a lot of entrepreneurs. We have a fundamentally very, very sophisticated career services and internship program. And they come to speak to our students and interview them, hire them, provide internships for them and so on. And the one comment I hear with some degree of constancy is, how does an organization create this flexible work environment and at the same time maintain and retain a sense of discipline and a sense of order in an environment? So educate us as to, maybe you can have an example or two of under what conditions does that work? How does that affect the rest of the population that may be observing this and disagreeing with it, or commenting about it as lack of commitment or laziness or whatever the case might be? And long term, do you see that shifting, or do you see that becoming even more so?
It's a wonderful question. First, there are certain workplaces that cannot allow flexibility. And the new hire, the employee, millennial, any generation, needs to know that.
Like a hospital.
Like a hospital. That was the example I was going to use. You cannot be a nurse from home. It simply doesn't work. If that's what you want out of a job, then this is not the place for you. That needs to be stated very clearly up front. There are some jobs that simply cannot offer flexibility. Second, I'm a big believer in that flexibility needs to be earned, and that there must be hurdles set up so that a new hire, anybody that requests the flexibility, needs to perform at a certain level in order to achieve it. That level needs to be measurable very clearly by the manager, the boss, the team in some way or another. Once that level of performance is achieved, they have earned flexibility. If they fall below that level of achievement in any way, they lose the flexibility.
But is this achievement, Cam, I mean, we live in a world that's so litigious, and everybody's concerned about discrimination in the workplace and all the rest. So this would have to be a very quantitative measure.
Undoubtedly quantitative.
Lest someone see favoritism in that process.
Written down, quantitative, evaluated by the appropriate people in the organization to make sure it's fair.
Yeah.
But my experience has been when people earn flexibility and can lose it due to performance issues, then they will do everything they can to maintain that flexibility.
So is that the only circumstance where you believe flexibility is appropriate?
I think if someone who has not had a flexible role wants it suddenly, or for whatever reason wants to work into it, it is not a right. I don't believe flexibility in the workplace typically is a right. Now it's a privilege, and you must earn the privilege.
And how do you define flexibility? Are you talking about, I come to work at 10 and work till 7 instead of 8 till 5? Are you talking about unlimited number of days off? Are you talking about just taking my computer home and working from there? What exactly is the definition of flexibility?
It's a scale. There's no single definition of flexibility. It's a scale depending on the workplace, the type of work being done, even the individual that's seeking it. It's a scale. So what I'm talking about is the ability to work from home from time to time, the ability to leave early from time to time and not have to make arrangements and seek permissions. However, I'm also a big fan of the managers, the boss, the leader, whoever it is, needs to say, yes, you've earned yourself a flexible thing, but Tuesdays at 9 o'clock, we have an all-hands meeting, and under no circumstances will that one be missed. You need to be there. So you can earn it, and there are conditions which they must be in an environment where their colleagues are present to be a part of the team.
See, I'm a baby boomer.
Sure.
So, you know, you've described me pretty well. So I worry about, you know, the old-timey stuff. For example, I grew up with the notion that the reason a corporation provides a vacation is so that you can vacate the premises, go somewhere, relax, get your mind off your work, and have a sufficient period of time to have renewal.
Beautiful.
That makes sense?
Makes sense.
So some people don't see it that way. Some people say, well, you know, I've got 3 weeks vacation, that's 15 paid days, and I'm going to take every Friday. I'm going to take every Monday. And so on the one hand, you lose the very reason that could have been the greatest contributor to for the purpose of vacation.
Right.
On the other hand, you create some disruption in the organization, especially back to your point about millennials and being in groups and teams, when a member of the team is always missing. Just help me figure out where is that middle ground of all that.
I think back in the day, historically, even when I began working, work was something you did from, let's pick a time, from 8 to 5. It's now all the time for most people. It's nearly all the time.
Because of technology.
Technology has been the greatest stuff in the world. It has also created an always-on environment. And I remember studies coming out of, I think it was PwC, who were offering their employees days off, and they wouldn't take it because the workload upon coming back was so overwhelming that it's easier to not take the day off than to take the day off. They because of the influx of content all the time. So the idea of a 2-week vacation is still very appealing to many people. I don't know how feasible it is to some people right now, just simply because of the fear of getting too far behind. Furthermore, I think there's more, if you're looking at the millennials, even the Xers as parents of young children today, you have more options with 10 paid working days, let's say, of 2-week vacation, than you do with 1 2-week block. I can do more with those 10 one-days than I can with a 2-week block. Therefore, I'm going to maximize my vacation by taking it in strategic places versus consecutive weeks. Now, I certainly understand the idea of refreshing. Europeans call it going on holiday, and I think there's great value to that. It's hard to find any of my colleagues, any of my peers, that have taken 2 consecutive weeks of vacation. I don't know one. They go for 5 days and come back. They go for 1 day and come back. I think there's perhaps something lost in that 2-week stretch to truly go get refreshed. And I think some of the Europeans would say it takes 2 weeks to drop the workload, to get it in your background. A real vacation is at least 3 weeks. I don't know anybody that's ever done anything like that. So I think the increasing technology, which has tethered us, you ask some generations, and I show them a cell phone, what is this thing to you? They say, man, that's a toy. That's a tool in a toy. It allows me to do things that I couldn't do normally away from the workplace. It allows me to do. You show other generations a cell phone, what is that to you? It's a shackle. It never allows me to stop. I think this thing is magic, they'll say, but I hate the fact that I have to be connected to it in order to stay employable.
So where does the whole discussion about quality of life comes in? If in fact, on the one hand, we all deserve to have a quality of life, right? I'm using a term that's commonly brought up, which means I want to take care of myself fiscally, so I work, make money, I provide for the future of my family and myself, but I also want to take care of my body and my mind and my soul, and I want to create friendships and maintain those friendships, those relationships. On the other hand, I can't take a week off or 2 weeks off to do anything, so I'm always doing it in snippets, and the likelihood is if I take a day here and a day there, it's doing errands on those days. You're not really going to unwind and redirect and reinvent, the very fiber of your heart.
I am seeing, in a parallel conversation to this, I'll get to your question, a changing definition of what it means to be healthy And going from the senior members of the workplace of being healthy as a place you go to get checked out, to the youngest members of the workplace being healthy as a lifestyle. It's a quality of lifestyle. It's not something that I do to repair myself. It's a way of proceeding throughout my life. Therefore, a flexible workplace will allow me to be healthy. A flexible workplace will allow me to balance my stress as well as my friendships and my health needs, etc. The quality of life issue continues to rear up as the workplace demands of more people. They throw a flexible workplace in as a solution for the quality of life. A flexible workplace allows me to have a quality of life to be at home to work, to be with the children at the big events, etc. So I think the definition of what a quality of life is changes with generation and even changes through different life stages.
And Cam, for any viewers who are watching us today and saying, you know, in this very area in which you and I are seated, in the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years, we've lost almost 100,000 jobs because they went overseas, because companies outsource offshore. And there is this definition about the American work ethic that has been reduced in some people's minds, and therefore it has become more expensive to produce, and hence companies say, well, I can just go to Vietnam and do it, or China and do it, or Mexico and do it, or wherever else in the world that may emerge in the future. So, you know, back to millennials, because that's the group that most of us sort of struggle with creating environments that are truly inspiring and atmospheres in which they can be their best, and yet abide by the culture, the folkways, the mores of the institution. What do we say to them? I mean, I worry about 20 years from now, you know, America losing so many more jobs, and I'm cognizant of the notion that some people I know in, let's say, furniture manufacturing will tell you that robotics is going to take care of this. We don't need people to be doing this kind of stuff. Today we know computers can dissect, analyze, and deduce much faster, better, and perhaps more accurately than we used to have a large number of researchers doing this work. So if we look forward 20 years, I mean, you know, I'm in the education business. We are attempting to guide our college students towards a bright future that's filled with success and framed with significance. What do we say to them? How do we alarm them or alert them, if in fact necessary in your view, that all of this is wonderful, but it could, in fact, at some point, because of external factors, if nothing else, economic, otherwise, geopolitical, this could, in fact, be injurious to your own future. So if you develop certain habits that will lead you down a path that does not give you the best results, is it part of our duty to enlighten in that regard?
I think it's the duty of a parent. It's the duty of a mentor. It's the duty of a university, any sort of education system, to say, here is the future. It is the job of these three groups that I've just mentioned to do their best to predict where things are going and to prepare the next generation to succeed in that environment. Mm-hmm. The parent that, here's what I'm doing, Nito, I'll tell you what happens under my own roof. Don't come watch, because you'll see a little bit of hypocrisy, but here's what I wish would happen every day on my own roof. I want my kids to learn how to empathize and lead. I'm not really concerned with their ability to manage the computer. They know that. It continues to get more and more intuitive. They have a sense, a discipline around this thing that I didn't have. It's easy for them. But talking to their teacher about a grade with which they disagree is agony for them. If I can teach my child to look their teacher in the eye and say, I disagree with the grade you've given me, and I'd like to argue my point, that child will shine in the future with their ability to communicate and to empathize and to convey their argument. I'm not worried about my child's ability to succeed in a workplace that's technology-based at this point, but I am worried about their ability to have a constructive conversation with an employer, with a parent, with a spouse, whomever it may be. The kids that have those skills will enter the workplace with an ability to develop and lead people, with a developed ability to communicate very persuasively. The education is available for them if they want it. It's taught all around us right here on how to do these things. The soft skills. When I first started this business, employers were asking me, how do I find coders? Can you give us some secrets on recruiting coders? We had learned about recruiting tactics based on our research. Well, how about coders? No one needs coders anymore. They're still in demand, but they need people leaders. And the millennials and the Xers, frankly, that I see in the workplace today that are shining above their peers, that have, number one, been elevated in their workplace by their bosses and leaders, and number two, been put on their colleagues have put them on their shoulders and said, lead us, are not the ones that have the biggest IQ or the greatest capability around the technology. They're the ones that can empathize and lead their teams. And that's the skill that, frankly, we're going to have to gather. With all the technology as the way it's coming, there's no way around it. The soft skills, we're going to go back to the demand. We're going back to the demand for those soft skills. I would tell my kids, find a course, a direction in the studies that you take that gives you an applicable skill upon graduation. But in no way in this process neglect your ability to interact with other people and lead people. That's the thing that's going to get you the furthest in your life.
And so, Cam, there's a measurable difference between learning how to relate to other people, build relational capital, communicate, persuade, perhaps in a healthy way argue a point. I worry about, I'm just going to play the devil's advocate for a second, I worry about the confusion that can emerge in that generation between my ability to persuade another person on merit and with regard, and my sense of entitlement, to use your example, that in my view I deserve a better grade, and it matters not that you're a person of authority, that really what matters is I believe I should have gotten an A, not a B. You made the choice to give me a B, but I disagree with you, and therefore I will, in my own way, create some contested view. I mean, you know, like you know, I have 4 children, and my wife and I tried really hard. My children are grown now; they're millennials, and we've tried really hard to ensure that there is a fine line, there is a methodical balance between respect for authority, among respect for authority and civility and persuasion and standing for your own rights and being a responsible citizen. To me, the magic is in the mix. I never told my children, go and argue with your professor about a grade unless I thought there was truly an unfair and unjust process there, or perhaps some error took place. Do you see what I'm saying? Because it transfers in the workplace where levels of leadership and management therefore are there for a reason, right? There's the org chart is there for a reason. And if everyone thought I could argue with everybody about everything, you know, why are you paying me this much? I deserve a lot more, I could say to you.
You got to make a case for yourself. You've got to make a case for yourself. And I would never tell my children, just go argue. Yeah, I would say prepare and make a case for yourself. Be very respectful of the authority figures. He or she, whatever that teacher is also going to be your teacher after the conversation too. So don't burn the bridges, make a case for yourself, be very respectful. And if you don't get it, know that you've tried, and at least that teacher will know that you're conscious of these types of things. Entitlement is something that we all deal with in terms of, in my opinion, we've gotten into a society where there's a lot of the word deserve, just like you said, I deserve. Why? Well, I can't exactly explain it. I just feel like I deserve. I want it, so I deserve it. And that, again, I think is the role of a parent, a teacher, a mentor, whatever it may be, to define the differences between what you feel like you deserve versus what you've earned and how you can argue that case. That's what you and I do. My 4 kids, your 4 kids, that's what we, if we're doing a good job as a parent, teaching them these types of things. There is the attitude prevalent of deserve. I deserve to be happy, something we've talked about earlier today. I deserve to be happy, I deserve a grade. We see very clearly where it's come from. That doesn't fly very far, as you well know. It creates issues and problems in the workplace. It's a challenge of parents and educators to make sure that does not become a fallback position, but a thing that you avoid the best you can in terms of you make a case for yourself. You gather your evidence and you make a case for yourself. If it doesn't come out, it doesn't come out. Bear in mind though, Nito, I think there's something that needs to be said here in the grand scheme of things. Our research, and it's often quoted with people, colleagues of mine that are in this study, is the first complaint of one generation about a younger generation goes back to Socrates. He's the first one that I can find that says, oh my gosh, what have we created here? In a matter of speaking, he said they're entitled. They're lazy and they're entitled. Just like I was accused of when I was entering the workplace. Just like I see what I say about my own children from time to time and everybody else. We've been here before. This road is long traveled. And people tend to rise to the occasion when that occasion is put to them. We were accused, my generation, the Xers, you guys are never going to amount to anything. We're all going to have to move to Costa Rica because as soon as you guys get into leadership position, this country's going down the hole. Well, a lot of the leaders in D.C., whether you like them or not, are doing it. They're the Generation Xers and they're carrying the mantle. The same will happen of the next generation. It will look and feel and sound different than what we expected, but we'll look around and say, you know what, they're doing a pretty good job. Typically, now let's go a little bit of a different direction here. When people go through some of the big life stages that change your point of view, your attitude around entitlement, around work, around respect for elders changes. And those life stages are critical to giving us all the context of the society that we're now in. You get married, you have children, you buy a home, you actually have to look at buying insurance because there are people depending on you. These things give you a sense of perspective, a sense of purpose. They are life stages that change your outlook. And each generation, since the baby boomers, have gone through these life stages at older ages. They're all going through them, but at older ages. When I look today at a 36-year-old millennial, the oldest element of the millennial, and compare him or her to a 26-year-old millennial, they are of a completely different view of the world. That 36-year-old is now more reminding me of me, is reminding me of the baby boomer that came before me. It's that first 10 years out of school that typically cause the greatest challenges to the workplace. And all these issues that we're talking about, entitlement, making a case for yourself, etc. Once through those life stages, those things often, not always, but often go away. My employers that are seeking my advice are essentially saying, what do we need to do to manage these people, to get them to come to work on time, work hard, pay their dues, put their nose to the grindstone for the first 10 years, because after that they become predictable, good in people. It's hard to keep them those first 10 years.
So that's experience, that's maturation.
That's maturation. Yeah. That is life stage events that lead to a quick maturation, yes.
So let's imagine that you're sitting in a room with me and we have in front of us 25 millennials and they're all seeking employment.
Yep.
And they all have a very high view of their self-worth.
Certainly.
And in a healthy way, not necessarily in a greedy way. And they're going to go out there and find a job. And they're saying to you, Mr. Marston, you're an expert about generational insights. It is likely the people who hire us are not going to be millennials. They're going to be, Xers, or they're going to be boomers.
Yeah.
And you're just talking quietly to them behind a closed door.
Yeah.
Well, what is the advice you'd be giving them? And what, more important than advice, what responsibility will you place upon them?
Advice. I would tell them, and it's amazing how frequently this works, I want you in your interview, I will say, to use the phrase, I will quickly get up to speed in that interview. If you hire me, I will quickly get up to speed.
Which means what?
Which means I will quickly become a contributor to your workplace.
I see.
So that's one of the things I want you to say.
Does that mean hard worker? Does that mean a high performer? What does that really mean?
It means that the interviewer wants to hear those words and it's music to his or her ears.
I see.
Good, I want to hire somebody that'll quickly get up to speed. It's employer speak.
Okay.
That if I give them this language and they repeat it back to the employer is going to say, this sounds good to me.
Do they mean it, Cam? Will they mean it?
You asked me to give advice for giving them a job.
Right,
Say
but I
up
want them to be
speed.
authentic, because if they come work for me, I'm going to figure out in a month that this was just a slick interview that they gave me, that they read in a book.
All right. Second thing, I'm going to tell them I want you to invest your time in figuring out your employer's systems, how things work. Okay. And I want you to work hard to fit into those systems. Your generation, I would say, is eager to come into employers and redefine how they do things. We know things differently, we know things better, our familiarity with technology, our view of the world. We should change this, this, and this. No employer in the world wants a new hire to come in and immediately begin changing things until that new hire is proven that they understand, can fit into, and respect the current system. So before you offer any change, show that you fit well into that system. And then when you offer change, once you've proven you fit in, when you offer change, the employer is going to lean forward and say, tell me more. You've proven you know my models, tell me more. Third, I would tell them the chances are your employer defines pay your dues in years, not in months and certainly not in days, but in years. And for you to curry favor with them, you must take on the long haul attitude. I will pay my dues for years. It's not going to be measured, I'm a new hire on Monday, by Friday you haven't paid your dues. You're going to have to be here for a while. Those things will, and furthermore, once more, an ability to communicate well and to empathize with the peers, with the employers, with the customers, if you face the customers, in ways that are visible to the employer himself, him or herself. If you do those things, your employer will embrace you and fight to keep you. That's what I would tell them. And we've done it. And I'd go further into, and these are little seminars that we offer, here is how your performance is measured and here is how your payment works. When you tell, in fact, it's any employee, there'll probably be people on your campus here that would be surprised. Your total cost of employment is 1.5 times what your paycheck is.
Absolutely.
When you do
That's
that,
assuming you're a performer. You're just talking mechanical terms now.
when you do that math, new hire,
Yes.
that's what you're worth to your employer. If you want a promotion or a raise, do more than that amount equates to. You don't deserve a promotion, you don't deserve a raise. Figure out that dollar amount and perform at a higher level, and the success will chase you at that point versus you chasing the success.
So I take you down the hallway, and we have another room, and in this room we have baby boomers or Generation Xers, and you're going to talk to them about how are you going to attract millennials and how are you going to guide them and mentor them and coach them so they can be productive citizens in your employ.
Okay. First, somewhat what we've discussed earlier. Get out of your own way. Identify what your preferences are. Are they necessary to getting the work done? Some are. Are your preferences necessary to getting the work done? If they're not, can you put them aside and let theirs flourish? As long as the job gets done to the level of satisfaction that you have asked of them, set those things aside. Second, they are not you at the same age. They have very little in common with you at the same age. Don't look at them and say, when I was your age, I wanted a boss or a mentor or a leader or a job that did the same things for me. Therefore, I'll treat you this way. It doesn't matter anymore.
I made that mistake with my own children.
Everybody does.
I look at them and say, when I was that age, I may not say it to them, I may say it to my wife, that when I was his age, I had already done this, this, and this. And you're saying that there is a fundamental, something's fundamentally wrong with that approach.
The transitions, the life stage transitions that we've referred to are happening 5 to 7 years later. The monumental ones are happening 5 to 7 years later in this next generation.
But why is that? Is it psychological, societal?
Societal, it's psychological, it's mostly societal. We allow, and there's nothing wrong with it, I don't believe, the youth to remain in their youth longer. Even our fundamental healthcare plan is allowing children to stay on their parents' insurance through the age, I think it's now of 26. We've institutionalized people to stay younger in their youth longer. You can live at home longer, you can stay on your parents' insurances longer, and that's what affluence does. Longer study, longer conversation for a different day. Affluence keeps people younger longer. It's a fabric of our society now. We say, and I hear myself say it, and I can't believe I say it, I swore 20 years ago, I would never say when I was your age. And I hear it coming out of my mouth, and I see the words in the air, and I'm trying to take them back. It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant because of the dramatic change in the life stages and when people go through them. So I would tell these managers, do not put yourself in their shoes and think about when I was your age. It's not relevant anymore. Back away from that thought. They're not like you at the same age. Set your preferences aside. Don't think about them at the same age as you were. They were raised being very well cared for. They didn't choose this. This is a parenting trend, and that parenting trend is now working in your workplace. So they have expectations of the type of care and attention that you'll give them. And if you do those things, you'll find a very loyal and productive workforce. If, on the other hand, you say, I'm going to toughen you people up. I'm going to show you what work is really like. You're going to learn what sacrifice is really like. You're going to pay your dues, and after 5 or 6 years, I might learn your name. If you say anything like that, you'll find the turnover numbers happening.
So Cam, in an organization, things are never perfect. Things are never ideal. It tends to be a mixture of things. An example, in a company of whatever number of employees, 500, 300, 1,000, you're going to have some millennials, you're going to have some baby boomers, and so on. And how does a CEO or vice president or a manager of a department deal with different groups under the same roof doing relatively similar work in terms of objectives and goals and outcomes for the company, and yet they march to the tune of different drums? How does a person do that without becoming a psychologically disturbed human being?
They've got to be a psychologically disturbed human being to take that job to begin with, in my opinion, because it's difficult. It's harder and harder and harder and harder.
But let's say they inherit the job. I'm here. I've been here for 20 years. Now all of a sudden I got millennials coming in. I've never been trained to deal with millennials, but I also have these other guys who believe that long hours, come to work early, stay late, work individually or work in groups, whatever the example might be. And all of a sudden I'm dealing with 2 or 3 populations that have different preferences, to use your word, and different points of view about what quality of life is.
They've got to over-communicate. What you're dealing with in that environment is change management. You've got to over-communicate why these differences exist and why a manager or supervisor, whomever we're talking about here, has to react differently to different requests. It has to come to the whole group of multiple generations, and the chances are the people in this 500-person workforce that we're talking about, that this person's oversees, is somewhat aware of these changes already. The things that motivate me don't motivate them. The things that they would want to do on their weekends aren't the same things I would want to do. They're aware of what these differences are. They need to be articulated by this manager to say, we've got these generational changes afoot in our workforce, and there are things that simply won't apply, management styles that won't apply, and I'm going to have to shift them up and change them for each of you. No one's right, no one's wrong. It's simply a reflection of the environment today. So they got to get out in front of the message, over-communicate, repeat what it is. It's a matter of communication and education. Here's why we have to do it that way. Now, there will be some people in that workforce that are bent out of shape, that are saying this is not fair, that are saying when I was their age, that kind of stuff. These people are in every crowd. Those people are just going to have to deal with it. Those people you can look at them, this manager would look at this person and say, if I didn't make these changes, we wouldn't be able to get and keep anybody. Is that what you want? Would you like your workload quadrupled? Because we can't get and keep anybody. These changes are necessary. Don't get angry at me. This is simply what's going on in our society today, and I'm having to react to it.
So when millennials become of age, let's say of a baby boomer, how much flexibility in their views? Do they simply give birth to more of the same, or do they really shift? You made the point that maturation, in 10 years, but might we let's take a 25-year-old, might we in 25 years see this person display characteristics of a current baby boomer, or are we going to see a different picture entirely, and therefore the world is changing, and therefore business and organizations really have to prep themselves for a very different atmospheric?
All generations become more conservative as they age. regardless of what your generational title is, you have grown more conservative as you've aged. Therefore, the prediction with the millennials is a 25-year-old, 25 years from now, will show some workforce characteristics of today's baby boomer. To say that they will mirror the baby boomer is not accurate, but they will show some of those characteristics. The understanding and recognition that there's no way to get around hard work, which means a lot of time spent focusing on the job. The ability to narrow focus and hold focus for a period of time. There's a great conversation today around multitasking. In my opinion, multitasking is doing many things poorly all at once. You need to learn how to focus, and that is a baby boomer characteristic today. My opinion is that 25 years from now, today's millennials will show some of those same characteristics that the baby boomers have today. Evidence is that the Generation Xers are. The Generation Xers entered the workplace 20 some odd years ago, and many of them are getting better at focus, spending more time, showing some of those, not just baby boomers, but historical, traditional workplace values that today the baby boomers embody, but have been embodied by generations previous to the baby boomers as well.
So how optimistic are you personally, living in this field, working in this field, guiding others in this field? How optimistic are you about the evolution of the workplace from a productivity perspective? Are we going to become more productive, less productive? Are we going to become more competitive, less competitive? With the world being so flat and technology connecting us with every quadrant of this globe, is all of this going to make us better? Is all of this going to make us faster, sharper, more profitable? Or is merely going to add to the amalgamation of differences and you just have to deal with them?
I'm hopeful that it'll make us sharper, better. The basis of capitalism is we will find a niche. Companies will find a niche and exploit that niche, and that niche will open up new opportunities. I'm hopeful that that will happen. I believe there will be a creative and competitive workforce created by our nation that continues to keep the United States in the vanguard of productivity, of innovation, whatever it may be. I am concerned that the education that many kids are getting today is completely irrelevant to where the world is going, whether in terms of quality of the education or application of the education. I'm a big believer in critical thought. One of the things that I know your university teaches, that was one of I got a degree, a liberal arts degree, and I feel like the critical thought has been very helpful to me. I would love to see more rigor applied to a liberal arts education, but with some sort of applicable skill that really...
As in pragmatics.
Pragmatic skill.
Yeah, as in outcomes, yes.
But I think I'm very optimistic. I don't foresee, we talked today about the 1%. The ones that will remain, that will achieve or remain or be a part of the 1% are the ones that are going to be the empathetic, creative, entrepreneurial types. And you're much more familiar with the education world than I am. Are we equipping people that way? At what rate? At what skill level? That's what I want for my own children. I want this to be you. I want you to go out and create, because that's where the opportunity may be going forward.
You would be very glad to know that at High Point University we focus on that. That here programs are created and resourced with that in mind. That our faculty and staff fully understand that while it is important to go to university and learn, accumulate knowledge and develop critical thinking skills and mature and evolve as a human being, it is of equal importance that when you graduate, you are a productive citizen, that you make the world a better place. That's why we say at High Point University, we're preparing students for the world as it is going to be,
yes,
not as it is. So we're doing an ample supply of that. I'm not sure you could ever do it fully, given accreditation requirements and other elements. So we actually here found a way to supplement that by bringing people like you, by bringing CEOs and thought leaders and the founders of Apple Computer and the founder of Netflix and the founder of Twitter, and people like General Colin Powell and Condoleezza Rice, who have overcome adversity, have done amazing things in their life, and along the pathway of their life, learn about leadership, learn about delegation, learn about energy management, and they can impart that to our students in very meaningful and purposeful ways. But Cam, I got to tell you, this is a very, very interesting discussion. You have invigorated our thinking about all of this. Some of us have got to do a little homework to adjust to all of that, learn more about it, put it to work in a meaningful way. But all of us have to have a sense of awareness about this world and about this workforce and about these generational insights. And for that, I want to thank you for being with us today and wish you the very best of everything. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Nito. It was a delight. Thank you.
Quality public television is made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC TV.